Well, that means the Chinese did, relative to them, a really big one. And the Chinese are keeping people working. How are they doing that? Two things. They have raised the wages of their workers significantly. For those that don't pay attention, it's really interesting. They've improved the benefits and they've improved the wages. That means during the crisis, let's get this clear, all right? Take this home to your family and explain it to them. During the capitalist crisis, where millions of people are losing their work and their jobs in the capitalist country, the world's largest communist country is doing two really interesting things. One, raising the wages and benefits of their workers, and functioning, here we go now, as the major lender of the money to the United States that finances the stimulus that doesn't work here. If you can keep that all in your mind and if you can explain it to your relatives, they will be very upset and probably not invite you again. But they will have learned something. The second thing the Chinese have done, besides build up the demand inside their own country by raising their workers' wages, is they've gone on a building spree. For those of you who have a chance to go to China, go to visit a city like Beijing or Shanghai or any of the other major cities, and you will see a modern industrial skyscraper universe. Looks a lot like the United States or something else. Building everywhere. It's extraordinary. Roads, highways, subway systems, they are just taking advantage of their wealth and of this crisis to do all the kinds of things that, well, the United States did in the Great Depression when the government hired lots of people. So the Chinese keep growing. If the Chinese keep growing, that explains Brazil. Why? In order for the Chinese to function, they have to get resources. They're not a resource-rich country. They need oil, they need all kinds of materials, and they have to find them around the world, otherwise their industrial machine stops. Brazil is one of the biggest, richest sources of raw materials and basic materials in the world. Biggest country in Latin America. They are now embraced by the Chinese and vice versa. Every day there's a new announcement of a deal between China and Brazil. China is providing technical advances, infrastructure building, all the things the Chinese do well, and the Brazilians provide the Chinese lots and lots and lots of what they need. The Chinese are unspeakably wealthy these days because they export to the whole world, and so they have a lot of money to go around and help countries and buy things. Over the next 2 weeks, you're going to see a remarkable theater in the American press because of the Chinese, just to give you another example, realizing that they must become much more self-sufficient in food over the next 20 years because of their dependence, growing dependence on imports of food. So they're going to make a bid any day now, unless the politics makes it impossible. They're going to bid for the largest potash producer in the world. Potash is the basis for fertilizer, artificial fertilizer. The largest block of potash in the world is in Saskatchewan in Canada. And the largest potash company in the world is there, and the Chinese are about to buy it. This is freaking out the Canadians and the Americans because they don't want that. The Chinese need it because to control food in the world, you got to control fertilizer. Nowadays, you can't produce food on a mass scale without fertilizing over time. So this is a strategic moment, and the Americans and the Canadians are gearing up to try to block the Chinese. The Chinese don't like that, and the Chinese have ways of retaliating. Lots of ways. And those retaliations are going to mount. If the United States and Canada block the Chinese from buying the potash to secure the food, without which they can't continue, the Chinese are going to have to figure out what to do instead of that. And they might want to take some steps to let the United States and Canada know that it's costly to do this sort of thing. What could the Chinese do? Last part of the story about the crisis. As the crisis unfolded here, not only state and local governments got less taxes, but so did the federal government. Yet at the same time, the federal government was called in to spend like a sailor. to get the economy going again. Friends, how is the American government going to spend more than ever before when its tax revenues are less than they used to be? It has to borrow the difference. That's how a government does. The deficit, all the word deficit means, is the difference between the money the government spends and the taxes it raises. So if it's going to spend more than it raises in taxes, it has to borrow. Who does the United States borrow from? Anybody who will lend to it. But there aren't enough Americans willing and able to lend. So the American government, particularly once the crisis hit in 2007, found itself borrowing more and more from outside the United States. And the largest creditor of the United States, the People's Republic of China. Think of it this way. They send all that stuff, all of you currently wearing a shirt or socks or underwear or making your toast in the morning in the Chinese toaster, etc. All the stuff we pay for with dollars. They don't need the dollars to buy American stuff. They don't want to. If they accumulate the dollars, what are they going to do with them? If they hold them literally in their vaults, they earn nothing. So what they do is they lend it to the United States government. They buy treasury bonds. This has, by the way, some lovely ironies. The United States borrows for all the things it spends on. A big item in the American budget are the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Who's financing the war? The People's Republic of China, which opposes both wars. That's why it's very important to pay attention. Otherwise, you might actually think they're really an enemy of the war. They are an enemy of the war. They're also financing the war. No way out of that. Well, here's something the Chinese could do if they want to signal to the United States that they're upset. They could stop lending to the United States. Worse, they could take the enormous hoard of treasury securities they already have and sell them. Whoa, where's the United States going to go? There's nobody to replace the Chinese. No one else is going to lend that kind of money. We're not going to be able to borrow the money the way we have. In order to get people to lend to the American government so we can spend it, the American government will have to do something it does not want to do. It'll have to offer higher interest rates to get people to lend to it. But if the interest rates go up, then the American housing market, what's left of it, disappears. Because nobody can afford a mortgage. Nobody can buy a car because the interest rate. So the Chinese can put an unbelievable squeeze on the United States by messing around with the treasury securities that affect our interest rates. That's the power that the Chinese have accumulated. And they're going to use that power. The more we push and make their situation difficult, they're going to push back. So that's a danger that's developing. The Chinese don't want the United States to do anything different than what it's been doing. Buy their stuff, borrow from them, fine with them. That's their way to become a modern industrial state. And they threaten what will happen to their own country if you ever close that spigot down. If you don't give them the jobs to give to their millions who need work in the cities. And the United States, it can't afford to mess around with the Chinese either. It's not just for the reasons I gave you. Here's the most important one I haven't mentioned to you. The American working class is going through a long period of economic decline. Maybe you've noticed that in your own life. If not, you will. That decline is spreading all across this country. One of the things that makes it relatively bearable is the incredible low price of the kind of junk Americans need to accumulate. Clothing and appliances. And the only reason they're cheap is because the Chinese produce them at ridiculous prices. You don't have to go to Macy's, you can go to Marshall's. You don't have to go to Sears Roebuck, it's dead anyway. You go to Walmart. Walmart is China's outlet. So they provide the cheap goods that is what's keeping the American working class from behaving a little bit like the European one, which I'm going to get to in 5 minutes. India, my last story. How's India figuring? India's doing pretty well. Now, what does that mean? With India, it's really bizarre. In China, when you say they're doing pretty well, we're talking about a country that's providing work for hundreds of millions of people. That's not India.